everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. I have Facebook and Instagram going. My name is Christina Previtt. I am lead faculty for clinical management of the fitness, athlete, pregnancy, and postpartum. I teach this course with Alexis Morgan, and I am so excited to be talking to you about pelvic health today. So we do an 8-week online course where we talk about all things women's health. And this course is for the non-internal pelvic health therapist who is looking to get a little bit more information about how to help women, especially with their athletic endeavors during pregnancy and postpartum. But it's also for internal pelvic floor physical therapists who want to be able to add this component or help their athletes outside of the early settings postpartum get back to their sport. And that was the reason for this course. And right now you probably heard that Alexis and I are working on a big revamp for this course. And that's because one, this world has really exploded over the last several years. So there's quite a few very pivotal papers that we think are important. And the second thing is that we really think that it's important for us to blend some of the others, actually some of the content from the other ICE courses, and spin it into the context of women's health, particularly as they navigate through pregnancy and postpartum. And personally, on my professional development side, over the last several months, I've been working on getting some of my internal pelvic floor courses underneath my belt to add that as a tool to my toolbox. And this is something that I told myself I would never do. I can see a ton of benefit from seeing individuals non-internally from a pelvic health perspective. I had pelvic floor PTs that I could refer to if I had any questions or there was just something that wasn't making sense. But the more and more I got into this world, the more and more that I wanted to have the complete picture. And I've talked a little bit about my journey. The interesting thing is that on my personal page, on my Instagram, I posted about how I never thought that I would be an internal pelvic floor PT and some of my thoughts around, as I've been going through some of my certifications, what that has looked like and how that has changed my clinical practice. The really interesting thing that came out of that post was that there were so many clinicians that were reaching out to me and saying, I am so interested in doing my internal pelvic PT, they said, but I don't want to just be a pelvic PT. And that was really interesting. And if that was just a one-off comment, I would have said okay, but it was over and over and over again. I got tons of comments on that post. I got tons of DMs seeing that what typically tends to occur is that you get your internal pelvic course and then all you do is internal assessments or all you do is work in that space. And I think that's really interesting and something that's really come up over the last little while. You see, the one amazing thing about pelvic health PT is that a lot of clinicians who come into this space become very passionate. You can just see how passionate they are about working with these women and men, I shouldn't say only women, around working with this population, how much of an impact that it has on a person's quality of life, and it reinvigorates them, and it's something that they want to dive headfirst into. They want this to be their whole caseload, and you see that they are really doing well in this space. But there's other PTs, myself included, where I love having the internal assessment as a tool in my toolbox, but that's exactly what it is. It is a tool in my toolbox. And since getting my internal courses, I find myself being much more comfortable talking about different urinary incontinence, pelvic dysfunctions, and sexual dysfunctions in my caseload. And that's been a really interesting personal development and personal professional growth for me that I have really enjoyed through taking these courses. But if you look at my caseload, I'm probably about 30% working in internal pelvic PT, about 40% of my caseload is working in geriatrics, and the other 30% is kind of a sprinkling of everything else that I see. And that's the way that I want my career to be. What can happen sometimes is when we get too narrow focused when it comes to any area of practice. This is vestibular, geriatrics, manual therapy, sports PT, pelvic PT, is that we can miss things. We can be so zeroed in that we miss the forest for the trees. And I think sometimes this can happen in pelvic PT as well, is if we're focused on what we see on the eval, the internal eval, we're missing something that might be coming from the low back, from extremity, from the motor control aspect of running, and we're not doing the gait analysis. All of these different things that come into pelvic PT. Alexis and I were talking, it's really interesting, around the world of women's health, and we really feel that sometimes we can take almost half of our course offerings at ICE and put kind of a postpartum or pelvic spin on these courses. So in this revamp, we're going to see some stuff from lumbar, we're going to see some stuff from extremity, we're going to see some stuff from CMFA, we're going to see some stuff from injured runner, we're going to be talking about persistent pain, and we're going to be contextualizing that in the space in a woman's life when she's in that pregnancy to postpartum journey. And we think that that's really important for us to be able to take a step back, to be able to look at what our internal assessment is going to show us, what our non-internal methods of assessing the pelvic floor are going to be, and then from there put that information into the other big picture items around movement, manual therapy, and some of our assessment with the process that has been, really talked about for years and years with Jeff Moore through ICE, and trying to have that come together and have a good clinical picture for our clinicians on the other side of this course. And so when I was thinking about this type of content, I was thinking about how can we start to encourage this integration between what is going on with pelvic health and what is going on with other areas of practice. And so I think the really important part for us as clinicians is, number one, if you are interested in taking your internal pelvic PT, but you do not want that to be your entire caseload, I think we need to start having a conversation with our employers around, what you want your ideal caseload to be. If I have a clinician who has taken, one clinician who has taken her internal PT, did not like it. So I do not give her any caseload that is involved in that space, which is totally fine. I have another clinician who loves internal pelvic floor, who loves working with this patient population. She's going to get more of that caseload. For me, I love working with athletes and I love working with geriatrics. So if we have somebody who is a little bit older who is needing pelvic floor PT, they're probably going to come into my caseload. So identifying where your passions lie and what you want your caseload to look like is going to be important. The second thing is that there are so many avenues for us to use internal pelvic PT as a tool in our toolbox in order to better serve our clients. And this is not just in the pregnancy and postpartum space, even though this is what we're talking about. This is in the geriatric space as well. I had somebody who I didn't even do the internal assessment because she had had some previous traumas, but she was having a hard time being a caregiver because she was completely losing her bladder as she was moving throughout her day, and she couldn't stop. She had urine leaking down her leg, but she was doing a transfer for her sister who was rather ill, and she couldn't stop. So in the middle of her day, she was having these rather embarrassing situations happening to her, but she couldn't do anything about it because of the situation and the consequences around. So as much as I wasn't doing the women's health side of things, I was linking that in the geriatric space. And then the third thing is that when we are using internal PT, that is just one tool in our toolbox. We need to make sure that even before we go into the internal, are we doing our lumbar scans? Are we doing our eggs and eases? Are we looking at our irritabilities? If there is not even just pain on board, because sometimes a lot of people come to us for things related to leaking and pelvic pressure, which they wouldn't really describe as pain. And are we, scanning the hip? Do we know if there's anything going on from an extremity perspective? And then once we have a good picture around function even, can we then use the information that we're getting from that internal assessment to blend all of that together? If we are focusing just on Kegel strength in supine, we are really not getting the whole picture of what's going on with this individual, and we need to make sure that we're going beyond that. And I think over the last couple of years, we've had more and more people who are advocating outside of that early postpartum space. How do we take the Kegel in supine and we pull it over into function? And we have a lot of really innovative thinkers that are going into this space. The International Continence Society just had their conference this past weekend, and there was so many sessions that were looking on how to bridge pelvic health with function long term in athletes and older adults in a whole bunch of different patient populations. And so I think that this world is something that is going to be exploding over the next couple of years. And I think there's going to be a push for this to be a general skill set for clinicians to be able to have as a tool in their toolbox and not a specialization, because we do have this specialty in pelvic health, but the information that we gather from some of those assessments are so important in other aspects of practice. There was a paper that was published in 2018 that showed that something like 90% of individuals with low back pain had some evidence of pelvic floor dysfunction on assessment that they were never really aware of. And so if we're seeing this blend that's happening between our orthopedic and pelvic practices, why are we not focusing on the pelvic space just as much as we're focusing on the lumbar scan? And how do we blend these worlds? And that does not have to mean that every single person has to be an internal pelvic PT, but it does mean that we have to be aware that this set of muscles that are this undercarriage, this under diaphragm of our body is going to be influencing our practice, whether we're in pelvic PT or not. And so this idea of this being, I'm not a pelvic PT, anything pelvic, I'm going to refer out to this person, is the incorrect way of thinking about our practice. Because we cannot just say, okay, I don't do pelvic floor, so I'm not even going to think about the pelvic floor and I'm going to let my colleagues do it. Because one, there might be a barrier for getting to see that colleague. Two, the therapeutic alliance is so huge. And three, it is influencing your outcomes. And so it's really, really important for us that we don't just think about it, whether you're in pelvic PT and just think about yourself as a pelvic therapist, that I think is incorrect. And also as an orthopedic therapist, to just completely ignore the pelvic floor, that is also doing our clients a disservice. And Alex, you're completely right. This is the same thing that's going on in vestibular. Oh, dizziness? I don't do vestibular. I'm going to ignore the fact that my client, every single time they sit up, is getting dizzy, and I'm not going to address that. I'm just going to focus on their functional training. And so we need to be blending these worlds. And so nothing in PT is a silo. Everything exists across a spectrum. We do not need to be experts in every space, but we should at least have a working understanding of what is going on to be able to speak to different things. We can give our client a bladder diary who is telling me that they're going to the bathroom 12 times a day, because we know that the average individual should be going between 5 and 8 times. If they're telling me that they're going every hour on the hour and they're not sleeping because they're getting up 4 or 5 times during the night, then let's give them a bladder diary. Let's talk about some things around urge incontinence, which does not require an internal exam, and we can significantly improve our outcomes because our clients are now going to be recovering, and we're going to be improving the quality of life of our client because they now can actually get some sleep and feel rested when they wake up in the morning. All right, I ended up going rant mode, but I want to make sure that we understand that no area of PT is a silo. If you are in pelvic PT, that does not mean that we are going to ignore the orthopedic side of our clients' lives, the functional movement side, the exercise side. And if you are an orthopedic PT, as soon as people mention pelvic, that you go running for the hills, that's not okay either. We need to make sure that we have at least a working understanding of what that musculature looks like and what is the cue to refer to pelvic PT, or how can we just have a conversation around the pelvic diaphragm being a component of our core system? How do we have that conversation with our clients? I think it's super important. And if you are interested in learning more about this, we are doing a big revamp. Our next course starts January 11th. We are an 8-week online course, Clinical Management of the Fitness Athlete, Pregnancy and Postpartum. We are going to be talking about how to integrate pelvic health with extremity, injured runner, persistent pain, lumbar, CMFA, MMOA, the whole gamut of ICE courses. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a very happy Monday, and I will actually see you on Wednesday, flipping hats, talking MMOA. All right, have a great week, everyone.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.